Welcome to Inspiring Working Lives, the Morgan Hunt podcast where we explore public sector leadership journeys. From honest chats about career highs and lows, to lessons and wisdom to inspire the next generation of leaders that will shape our society.
Hello and welcome to the Morgan Hunt Inspiring Working Lives podcast. Today's guest is Angela Foulkes, CBE. Angela is Chief Executive and Principal of the Sheffield College, bringing more than 30 years of experience across further education. She began her career in teaching and has since progressed through a range of senior leadership roles, building a strong track record across curriculum development, student support and skills delivery. Over the years, Angela has taken on responsibilities spanning skills and employability, pastoral and student services, safeguarding and equality, diversity and inclusion. This breadth of experience gives her a well-rounded perspective on both the operational and strategic challenges facing further education today. Alongside her role at the college, she is actively involved in shaping regional and national skills agendas. She chairs the Sheffield Skills and Employability Board, co-chairs the South Yorkshire Skills Advisory Board, and contributes to wider economic and educational strategy through roles at the Mayoral Combined Authority. Angela was awarded a CBE in the 2024 New Year Honours in recognition of her services to further education. Based in Sheffield, she is passionate about the transformative impact of education and outside of work enjoys cycling, running, music and the theatre. Angela, thank you so much for inviting me to Sheffield College today.
No problem at all. Welcome.
We always like to start our podcast by finding out about your childhood, and particularly if you had any career aspirations as a young person.
So I grew up in a council estate in Manchester, and my mum and dad still live in their council house. My dad was a mechanical fitter, so he worked at Kellogg's, and we, as kids, me and my brother, we got a lot of the little figures that were in the Kellogg's boxes. We got them all free.
Wow.
Loads of them all over the house.
Yeah.
My mum was a dinner lady, and the thing that we did most as a family, we did a lot of sport. And so I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I think when I was a kid, my aspiration, I genuinely thought I was going to be on the ATP tour. I thought I was going to be a tennis star, because that's the thing I can do sport-wise. I can play tennis. Well, I used to be able to play tennis. If I tried it now, I'd probably injure myself horribly. But yeah, I genuinely thought I was going to play Wimbledon one day. That was probably my childhood career aspiration.
Wow. And did you used to watch it on the TV?
Oh, yeah.
Was it a colour TV? Was it black and white?
When I was really little, it was black and white.
Yeah. But then suddenly the green of the court would appear, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I was sort of thinking about this. I was thinking about my childhood and thinking, my mum and dad got central heating in COVID. And they phoned me up one day and said, "Oh, we're thinking about getting central heating." And I thought, I didn't know you didn't have it yet. Seriously, they've only had central heating for about 5 years.
Wow.
And you know, when you kind of think that was just my normal childhood. Was we lived in a small house, and I had a happy childhood, but you don't think about the things that you just sort of accept as usual now, and it wasn't usual at all. So yeah, there's the thing I remember vividly is because it was a council house. About every 3 years, someone would come and paint the front door a different colour. It was nice when it was red. It was horrible when it was yellow.
Right, yes, yeah.
Wow. There'd be a man who'd just be painting your front door.
Right.
Like Rogue.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I thought I was going to be a tennis star.
Okay. So what happened then during your sort of development which stopped you becoming a tennis star, or maybe the career moved somewhere else?
Well, I think if I can just talk really briefly about, and I suppose people in education do this quite a lot, but when I was 10, I had a teacher in my primary school. He was the deputy head. And he decided that the year group that I was in, he was going to prove a point about getting people through the 11 plus. So he worked with us for 2 years, and 10 of the people in his class passed the 11 plus. And I was one of those people. And he was a truly inspirational man. He really was. He was a great teacher. But more than that, the thing I remember about him was every Friday afternoon he'd bring his guitar and he'd play Bob Dylan songs. So enduring love for Bob Dylan because of him. And then he'd walk home along the canal towpath, which ran along the top of my street. So I'd walk back with him for the first 10 minutes and then cut down to my house. He'd have his guitar on his back. And this is a teacher in the, so it's always stuck with me that he committed to a group of children. And I was really lucky because then I went to a school where education was a prize, it was valued. I don't know that it was the happiest thing I've ever done because as a working class kid going to that kind of school, it was pretty tough. But it gave me a good education, a really good education. But I didn't really like it. I didn't like the school. So I quit that when I was 16 and I went to work in a bank. At that point, I was still playing tennis, but I think I realised I probably wasn't good enough for the tour. So, I stuck with local tennis, carried on for a while.
Got it. Well, it's lovely hearing about that inspirational teacher who worked with. And it's funny that through these conversations, there's a blast from the past that comes up where somebody really made a difference.
Yeah.
And didn't have to make a difference. They chose to make a difference.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, he's the sort of enduring teacher. The person that I remember of all my teachers, there's 2 or 3 I remember, but I don't know that I would have been on the path that I've been on, which has been very zigzaggy, at all. I genuinely don't think I'd have been anywhere near it had I not had the luxury of him as my teacher. Because the other school was a secondary modern school for girls, so that would have been typing.
Right.
That kind of traditional, female jobs.
And that's not right or fair, is it?
Oh, no.
Classified at that age,
No.
right? This is you. Yeah.
Yeah. So the opportunity for an education that included languages and literature and science, wow, the way that opens your mind, I think has probably shaped quite a lot of the choices I've made over a period of time. But I did leave when I was 16 because I thought I'd had enough of being in a school environment. It felt a bit restrictive to me. And my parents were, because it's a working class upbringing, their whole thing is about you need to get a job because you need to earn some money because that's how life is. So I was lucky enough to get a job in Williams and Glynn's Bank, which only lasted for 6 months, and then it became Royal Bank of Scotland.
Yes.
I got a pen, commemorative pen. It's probably still in my mum's house somewhere. And I stuck that for 3 years. I managed to do that for 3 years. I was, I quite liked the sort of banking and finance world in a way. I didn't mind it at all. But attitudinally, I don't think it was for me because I did spend a lot of time making tea and coffee.
Right.
And stuffing envelopes and doing very menial admin tasks.
Yes.
And, that wasn't very thrilling.
Were you observing what was going on, though, in the bank in terms of some of those interactions, maybe with the manager or assistant manager?
Yeah.
Thinking, that's how it's done.
Yeah, I suppose there were some really good role models and there were some really awful role models. And I think the thing that, so I like to think I am quite observant and I was aware of when it was working. So there was a manager in the bank at one point who was just really good with the people in the bank. And what that looked like, if you were me and you were 18, was someone who genuinely was, sort of said good morning to you and asked you if you'd had a nice weekend. And it felt like nothing. But the person who replaced them was utterly disinterested and it was just, are you on time? Have you done it quick enough? Is it working well enough? And often it would be, we've run out of milk, you need to go and get it. And I'd be like, okay, right, but that's, why me? There was a little bit of why me. Meanwhile, though, my friends that I had from school had stayed on at school. So for 2 years they were around and it was fun. And then they went to university and I thought, wait a minute, I'm still here. So I sort of contemplated this a little bit. And what I'd done was I obviously had something subconscious that was not wedded to working in a bank because rather than take up banking exams, I went to night school to Central Manchester College and did A-levels at night. So I did one a year for 3 years. And So subconsciously, I'd made a decision to do academic study without really thinking it through. So I used to hop on a train into Manchester, do my 3 hours of night school, and then hop on a bus home. And I did that twice a week for 3 years. And when I think about it now, I think, what was I thinking? You know, that's a massive commitment. But I still did it. So when my friends had gone, I thought, why aren't I going? Why aren't I thinking about university? Why aren't I sort of taking that leap? Why am I staying here? And I thought, what's better than being an accountant? That's what I thought. Do with that what you will.
Okay, so but you're thinking, right, so I'm kind of in this world of finance, and maybe the step up is accountancy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you go off to university to study accountancy.
Yeah, I did.
And how was that?
I think, well, the world of university was eye-opening. I left Manchester, I went to London. And that was great. So just as a young person in London, it was like a huge explosion of experience. And for the first year, I think accountancy I found it fairly easy. You know, I found it an easy thing to do. So I was probably coasting a little bit and enjoying my life. And as I went into the second year of it, I kind of lost my love of it for a little, because I don't think it was for me. I don't think it had enough creativity and in the right way. And I don't think it was, you know, when I was talking about my school and I sort of said there was science, there was literature, there was languages. And then I moved into a very technical, repetitive almost world. And so, you know, I kind of stuck at it, but I didn't love it. And I think the sort of defining moment for me was knowing that I just really couldn't see myself in an accountancy firm in an office day after day. And at this point, you know, it's kind of the late 80s, early 90s, and you know, that whole look and feel, I'd sort of gone from banking attire, which would fit in the world of accountancy, to ripped jeans, no hair, literally no hair.
Wow.
It was expensive to get your hair cut.
Yeah.
So I just shaved it off, for example. And, you know, that sort of, I'd moved into a different space in my little world. So I thought, I can't do this. Life's too short.
Okay.
So I've got the skills, and I sometimes use them. I'm very quiet about it at work, so this is a bit of a public outing, you know. But it wasn't for me as a long-term option, really.
Right. But you are picking up skills all this time, aren't you? You're learning different things, and you're also learning what you don't want to be and who you're not.
Yeah. I think there was something that I think I realised was that the part-time jobs that I was picking up were very public, like usual jobs for students. So I was working in shops, or I was working in bars, and I get a lot of energy from other people. And I think that part of the reason for me pausing and thinking, is this actually for me? I felt like I needed a bit more, and I wanted to experience a world where there was more creativity. There was a bit more, I don't know, probably more politics even, perhaps, you know, something that was a bit less transactional. So, and a few more people. And I think that taking the years that I had along the way, but the banking job was about people. You know, whatever the skill was that you were executing, standing at the counter, it was still about the people who came to the counter. And I don't know, I had a sort of urge to, I wanted to do something different. Took a bit of a punt. I started again. That was pretty tricky. I got a pretty much full-time job in Woolworths. I was the toy lady in Woolworths. That is literally what my title was. Yes.
Toy lady.
Toy lady in Woolworths for nearly 3 years.
What was your bestseller?
Simpsons toys.
Wow.
Genuinely.
Gosh,
One year it was wrestlers.
Yeah.
1 year it was The Simpsons. It was always at Christmas, the board games.
Right.
You would not believe how many people buy Monopoly at Christmas. Well, they did then, anyway.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got this kind of conflict building.
Yeah.
How did you resolve it?
So I switched direction, and I decided I'd give myself, I thought, I will work in Woolworths, and I will switch paths. And I did a degree in cultural studies, which meant that I could study literature, art history, media, women's studies, gender studies, film studies. I could kind of do a multidisciplinary social sciences, humanities type degree, and I could just go, what's going on in the world? I could learn a little bit more about the world and about how it works, as opposed, something just a little bit more, I don't know, it felt more my style, a little bit more my pace. So I went off to do that, and I think the learning of that was just fantastic. But I think combining that with pretty much working full time, which because I was self-supporting, I'd spent all the money I was entitled to. So this time around, to be able to afford it, I had to work to pay for all of it. And so I had this. It was a bit like a split personality, actually. So on some parts of the week, I was at university with my university friends, learning about the world, learning about a different way of thinking, a different political way of thinking, a different perspective on, how people work, how people live together in communities, all that kind of stuff. And then I was popping into the East End to work in Woolworths with people whose permanent job that was, because I didn't ever think of that as my permanent job, but it was theirs. And those people became really good friends of mine because I was there for so long, and they were people who, it was two totally different groups of people, and contemplating how that worked, the whole of that Woolworths thing, how it worked and how the managers worked and how it felt to be part of that team. It felt good to be part of a team like that because they were proper people, and some days it was awful and some days it was amazing, and the Christmas parties were always raucous, And I have a friend from then thinking about how long it is, and every year, birthday card and Christmas card, every year, even now, it's fantastic, But I suppose the thing it showed me was that, there's a bit of a resilience thing in there because it was really hard to get up on a Saturday morning. Imagine I'm a student and I'm gone out on a Friday night, and then I've got up on a Saturday morning and I'm in this shop at 8:30, and it's my proper job at that point, and I'm thinking I've got to make this look like I'm actually here.
Yeah.
Whereas in body I'm here, but in spirit, no chance, But it was people's serious jobs, so I had to take it seriously. And the manager there was interesting, fairly laid back, high standards, but when it came to it, he expected us to turn up and do our jobs well, and I was kind of like, well, yeah, okay, that's fair, There wasn't many rules.
Right.
It was good. It was a good time. It was just exhausting.
Yes.
Exhausting.
Yeah. But it was culture, I guess, that held it together and made everybody perform at a high level.
Yeah. Well, I also think there's something about if you're working with a group of people who genuinely like each other as well, respectfully, they liked each other, and there was always banter. So the break times, there was always banter, and it was good banter. It was proper people's banter. It wasn't, that was their life. It was their life's work. Mm-hmm. And to be part of it felt kind of special. I stuck it nearly the whole of that study time that I did. I finished working there just before I finished that course. And then I felt a little bit adrift. And so at the end of that course, this is where I think I took a very huge veer. I thought I can't do nothing for a whole summer because I'm not that person. I'm always busy. And I saw at university, an advert to volunteer. So I ended up volunteering every Wednesday at Newham Sixth Form College with some GMVQ students, just as I suppose as a teaching assistant. But when I signed up for it, I don't think I knew what it was. I think I just thought I'll do some volunteering because I did a bit of other volunteering and I quite liked being a volunteer. It's just interesting because you meet loads of different people. Anyway, so I turned up at Newham Sixth Form College every Wednesday afternoon, I think it was. And I think it was GMVQ business studies. So, loads of 16-year-olds in a room mucking about and whatever. But it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. I kind of enjoyed being the teaching assistant. Maybe it's because I could drop in and out. I don't know. But I kind of quite like the vibe of it. And at this point, I'm starting to realise that I really like working with people. That, I didn't think I did. Because, it's a lot of effort, isn't it? And it's kind of... But if I look at everything I'd been doing, there was always people somewhere along the way. Anyway, so I do this. I think, this is good. I don't mind this. Maybe I could do something with this. So I saw an advert for the first year of the PGCE, post-16. at London's Institute of Education. I thought, I'll give that a punt. Totally speculative. Not just speculative, nothing. So I applied for that and I got accepted and was a bit like, how did that happen? That's very rogue. This is July and the course starts in September. So this is very, it was very ad hoc, I would describe it as. So I was the first cohort of that qualification to do that through the Institute of Education in London. It was really, that was whirlwind. So that was learning to be a teacher in 9 months, But it was literally in the sort of June, I thought, I did a bit of volunteering, it'll be fine. By September, I was learning to be a teacher.
Yes.
And I can honestly say that I don't think any of that was planned. It was just, I saw something and I thought, I'll give that a punt. And then I saw something else and thought, well, that was quite good fun. What if I actually sort of gave it a shot and saw what happened? All in the space of a couple of months. And then before I knew it, there I was, learning to be a teacher. And being told after a month that I had a placement in a college. I was like, really?
How did I get here?
No, I know. Nothing. I had nothing at this point. I was going, I don't know what I'm doing. Which is kind of felt like a lot of responsibility to not know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I'm sure the teachers who were looking after me felt the same, to be honest.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so then you turn up in your college for the first time.
Yes.
As a paid-for teacher. Yes, on salary.
So I do that year.
Yeah.
And then I spent 3 years as an hourly paid lecturer in London.
Right.
And I worked in lots of different colleges. I had some good luck moments where the first job I ever got as an hourly paid lecturer, I sent my CV to loads of places. And this person phoned me up and she said, I think you were in the same year doing your degree as my daughter. And we had a conversation and I said, oh, no, I remember your daughter. Yeah, yeah. And she said, oh, why don't you come in and you can do some hours teaching GCSE English? And I went, thanks very much. I mean, how odd is that? Just what a break.
Yeah.
But because that was Lewisham College, which at the time was an amazing college. I mean, it's still an amazing college, but right then it was at its, that led to a spin-off into a few other jobs. Right. Yeah. So I got lucky. I got properly lucky. And then I worked hard. So and in that first year, I had 2 or 3 colleges I worked for. I did at least 25 hours a week, I did that for 3 years. And in the summer of the 3rd year, I thought, this is the last year I can do this as an hourly paid. This is really hard. It's exhausting. If I don't get a permanent job this year, I am done with this. I need something else. Not because I don't like it and I don't want to do it. I love it. But I can't sustain the work level. It is tricky having 2 or 3 different jobs, managing all the different systems, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I put myself out there and I ended up with 2 job offers that summer. Sheer good luck. I took one at a tertiary college. I took a permanent job at a tertiary college in Harrow, which was, as a teacher, probably my favourite job ever. Of all the teaching I've ever done, I think that was probably the job that I enjoyed the most.
Why?
Maybe it's because it was my first job as a permanent paid teacher. Maybe it was the team, because the team was so professional and they were so well organised. And I walked in there as a novice, and everything was there. So they were filing cabinets of resources and, and it was like paradise in a way, because I would open a cabinet and I'd get lost in it because it was just, it was learning for me as well. And, they had, for a kid I'd always read a lot. I've always read a lot. I still read a lot. And, I'd open a cupboard door and there'd be thousands of books in this cupboard. And I'd be like, what is going on here? This is like paradise for me. It was amazing. But I also think it's that the whole place was about learning. And the students were there because they wanted to learn something and they wanted to go on to university or whatever they wanted to do. And they were absolutely delightful. And I was a personal tutor. I'd never been a personal tutor. That was new, So it was great. It was great. In my 2nd year there, I got offered the chance to be a curriculum manager. I think it's because I work hard. I've got quite a hard work ethic. So I think because I was there, busy, focused, I was getting stuff done. I was really into it, This was great. It was the best thing ever. So I got this chance to be I was a terrible curriculum manager. I had no idea how to manage. I had absolutely no clue. I think about this sometimes in the job I have now, and I kind of think, if you're a really good teacher, if you're really good at that part of the job, doesn't mean you're going to be a great manager, does it? And I was a terrible curriculum manager because I thought, if you just say to someone, you need to do this, and then they're probably going to do it. What? And maybe my ideas weren't the best. And maybe if the things that I wanted to change weren't that good of an idea. But I thought they were. I was young and I was keen. I don't think it was my finest hour.
Right, okay. How did you get through that?
I think some of it I was lucky because I'd been working there 18 months or so and the people were really lovely and, there was some good people there who kind of went, what is it you're trying to do? Good questions for me. And the other thing is I do know, I think I'm all right at kind of going, I totally got that wrong. Those are my sleepless nights. I knew I was getting it wrong. And there were a couple of people there I trusted well enough to sort of say, I'm getting this really wrong. What is it I'm doing? What could I do differently? And there were some people there who gave their time, which is the joy of teachers, to be honest. Teachers are good at giving their time and kind of sometimes being a bit brutal. But most of the time offering advice. And the person that was upset, there was a person who was really upset with me and I kind of said, I've really upset you and I didn't mean to and I'm so sorry, I just don't know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
I've never done this before, so what can I do? And that person heard their response immediately, soft shoulders, straight back down when, well, why don't we do it together? And I was like, that'd help, Yeah. So I think sometimes, that was pretty bad, I have to say.
But another great lesson. That sort of,
I
think people go two ways in that situation. They either stiffen the veneer of management almost, which is, you can't possibly talk to me like that. Or, there's a humanity and an expression of, let's do this together. And people buy into that more, don't they?
Yeah.
Everything.
The person that helped me in that moment, I've only just thought of this, what a theme this is. Still sends me a birthday and a Christmas card. And I haven't worked with that person since 2000.
Wow.
I know, I've just thought of that. Literally this minute, I've just gone, what is it with Christmas and birthday cards with me? And, so sort of lasting impressions, the people who do that are the people who probably helped me. They weren't, like along the way, they're probably the people who gave, even when I was getting it really wrong.
And continue to give.
Yeah.
And show interest.
One year I didn't get a Christmas card from that person. A total panic. I'm on the email. I'm going, are you all right? They're older than me. So I was going, are you all right? Everything all right? Yeah, I just didn't get around to it that year. And it's me panicking. It's quite funny, actually. But it's a good point. But I do think that my realisation about maybe 5 or 6 years later was that I probably, I'm a lifelong learner without really ever realising that I am. It took me quite a long time to realise that I actually genuinely like learning. So I'm kind of seeking feedback or I'm kind of going, why did that not work? Or that worked really well. Why did that work really well? And I'm really keen to understand. Apparently this has got something to do with having engineers in the family who need to know how things work.
Right.
This is the definition my family have applied to me. Need to know why, apparently. But,
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so this is a great story. It's all building now, and you've made your first breakthrough into leadership. It's not been straightforward.
Yeah.
But you're starting to work your way through it.
Yeah.
Where does it go next?
I left that job because the job changed. And I thought, well, do I want to stick around a bit? Do I want to move on? I moved on. Interestingly, I followed the college. There was a college merger, and I followed one of the principals. One of the principals moved on of the two colleges, and I followed the one that hadn't been my principal, because in the merger process, I felt that there was a level of transparency, respect, authority, a leadership style that I felt I could get along with. So I followed that person into a different job, and I took a cross-college job in a sixth form college, which was a pretty tricky job because I'd never worked across a college. I'd always worked in a department, and this is bearing in mind, I wasn't that long into my career as a teacher. So I took this cross-college job and thought, well, I've got no idea how to work across the college. I guess this is a learning curve that is going to come at me, fairly quickly. But it was a sixth form college, so it was one site. There was some really good people. And the thing that I learned was if you had lunch in the canteen, with the table of people who always had lunch in the canteen, you could get a lot done. And they were lovely. They were such lovely people. And they worked in all of the different departments. And so I just kind of plonked down in my first week and went, I'm new here, I don't know anybody. Hello.
No, right.
And they were so, so lovely. And I'd be kind of like, this job, I've got to do this job. How am I going to do it so that it doesn't, what do you want it to do? And they were like, over lunch, for about 3 weeks, just telling me what not to do, because this college it's quite parochial because it's in a town outside of London. So, the people who worked there kind of lived around it. All the students were from the town. Because in London colleges, lots of movement. So they were trying to explain to me that whatever I did, I had to consider how people would respond and react to it. And, so picking their brains a lot. I stuck that job for 2 years. It was a great job, actually, and it was a really lovely college. And I only changed that job because towards the end of that job, I had my first child, and it was a long journey. So I thought I need a job close to home. I probably would have still worked there for a lot longer, actually, but it was just too far to travel. Yeah. So the things that I gained there was that cross-college piece and how to influence rather than lead. That was the key kind of learning point for me, because I had literally no authority over how people did their jobs because I didn't lead or line manage any of them directly. So what I had to do was create a compelling case for change and influence people to get on board, which is not an easy task and takes a lot of communicating. And I don't know that it wasn't entirely successful, but it was definitely a learning curve for me, and it was fun. It's quite a lot of fun. And because it was a small place, I think it was manageable. But, I think probably that was the start of that cross-college piece that I kept threading back through afterwards. Right. When I left there, I went to work in a college in northeast London, which was brilliant. Before this job, that job was the one that I've had for the longest. So I stayed there 5 years. And that was a college that was in trouble when I went there. That they were not in a great place from a quality point of view. So the task was to improve quality. That was probably, I loved that job, and there were a couple of reasons for that. As the head of the department, did I get everything right? No, not really. They were a team who didn't necessarily understand that they were providing grade 4 education. And I don't know that I'd appreciated how a frank conversation might not land well. So I was very frank. And, it took about 6 months to regroup from brutal honesty.
Right. Gosh.
So that was a good learning curve for me. And
wasn't the lunchtime opportunity with these guys then?
Well, those were people that I line managed. So this is a slightly different thing. Yeah. So I'm the head of department, and I'm trying to talk to the curriculum managers and the teachers and to say to them, look, we've got a lot of work to do because the college is grade 4, but also this area, we've got a lot of improvement to do. And I don't know that anybody had laid out for them that team needed to improve. And so, but I started with, we need to improve, as opposed to, where do you think we are? When I sort of reflect on it now, I could have just as easily asked them where they thought they were, where they thought the level of the teaching and learning was, what they thought of their student outcomes. I could have asked them lots and lots of questions. What I did was go in there and say, clearly this isn't good enough. I didn't literally say that, but, that's effectively what they heard. And it took a long time to regroup from that. It took a longer time to regroup than I thought. I also think at that point, because it was a new college and a new team for me, I didn't really fit anywhere. It was a big college, so, it was a much bigger college. So I didn't really fit anywhere. And it took me about a year to find my group. And I signed myself up for a leadership course at this college. And the people on that course became my group of people. And they were my peer group or slightly above my peer, my sort of pay grade peer group. And those people are still friends of mine now. A bunch of 4 or 5
Sending you
of us.
Christmas cards. Yeah.
Not so much. They do buy me beer at the AOC conference, so that'll do instead, So this is good. And we try to catch up at least once a year in person outside of the AOC conference. But it took me a little while to find somewhere to fit because it was a true leadership role. It was proper line management. It was dealing with people whose performance was not quite good enough. And there was a lot to do in that college to improve quality and standards. So it was a tricky job to do. I think the first 2 years I probably got 40% right, in terms of how things landed, how things felt. I did the leadership course and really learned a lot about my drivers and my logic, how I think about things. And I reflected a lot on that and thought, yeah, the things that drive me don't drive other people. So, my upbringing has a lot to do with the things that drive me. And everybody else has got a different set of drivers. And what we need to do is kind of like be conscious of that, because I'm thinking we just need to work hard and get on, let's get this done. And other people are in a totally different headspace, So it was good to be a learner, and it was good to have people to lean on in my peer group. And I still treasure that now. And I stayed at that job for 5 years, and I was really proud of what we did there. It was great, and we turned that college around and collectively. And I still think of that with a great deal of fondness in terms of what I learned about myself in leadership and what I learned about how people respond to leaders. How just the way that you walk around a place can really influence how people think about you. And you're not always going to get it right. And sometimes not getting it right isn't the point. So I didn't necessarily get it right, but underneath the premise of what I was trying to do was right. How I put it out there might have been a little bit wrong. I learned a lot about that, which was good.
But that self-awareness is crucial, isn't it, as part of the learning process? Because if you're not prepared to say, I biffed that one, or I could have done that better, how do you ever get better?
I don't think so. I think over the following years, I think I got a lot better at saying, I'm sorry, I got that so wrong. Whereas at that point in my working life, I think I wasn't quite as aware that just literally saying, I'm so sorry I got that wrong, would have changed an entire moment, and that the power of just saying, I'm not sure I got that right, it is so transformative for some people. And I think just stopping for a minute, every now and then stopping and going, wait a minute, how am I going to do this? I think my big takeaway from that job was not what I was trying to do, but how I was doing it. And I come back to that a lot even now. I often say to the team I work with now, I say, we've had a lot of conversations about what we're going to do, but do you want to talk through how you're going to do it? Because how is so much more powerful. And that's a lot of that is about how people react, respond, how people hear what you've said, like whether they hear how you've said it or the words you've said. I really believe that if you put more effort into how, you're more likely to kind of get things moving. Just me.
Great message, great lesson. Okay, and where does the road take you next then?
So at this point, my kids are, I think, 6 and 3, and we've decided as a family we'll relocate, which was massive. So we relocated to Sheffield. I had a job at another college in South Yorkshire. It was a massive, massive leap. So I'd lived, we lived in London for 20 years. And we up sticks, moved to Sheffield. The only other time I'd ever been to Sheffield was for a gig in the 1980s.
Really?
And
Who
for an
did you
interview
see?
at the University of Sheffield.
Right.
That was it. I came over here to see not a known band. Okay. I got on the train one night and I thought, that sounds good. We'll do that, shall we? Yeah, let's do that. Anyway, if I was to give my 18-year-old self advice, it would be don't just jump on a train randomly. Although I probably would ignore myself right now, wouldn't I?
This episode is brought to you by Morgan Hunt, a public sector recruitment agency with over 30 years of experience. Whether you're looking for your next role or growing your team, we match purpose-driven people with organisations making a real difference. Visit morganhunt.com to find out how Morgan Hunt inspires working lives.
I'd never really been to Sheffield, and I took a job in the other college. That was a cross-college job. It was, again, a grade 4 college, lots and lots to do. I stayed there about 5 years, and I learned so much. I learned so much about myself in that job. It was a really hard job, and I learned how to manage conflict in an organisation and conflict in a team as well. There was a lot of conflict because there was a lot of work. You know, it was a big turnaround. It was a really successful turnaround, and some of the innovation and some of the opportunities I got there were amazing. So I got the opportunity to be creative, to take risks. I learned about what I learned. One of the key things I learned about myself is that I've got quite a high risk appetite. So I'll give it a shot, which I think, you know, when I reflect on my work pattern, I've kind of gone, oh, what's the worst thing that can happen? I'll give it a shot, without really thinking about that as a risk appetite. And I landed in this college and was given the opportunity to try things, which meant that I really went, why don't we give this a go? Why don't we give that a go? I was introducing things, a couple of things a year in that role. They weren't always popular. Sometimes, you know, my colleagues thought that the ideas I had were just ridiculous. So I learned to be very resilient. I learned to take a lot of criticism. But I also learned how to really think through an idea end to end and to position it so that you could have a conversation about it and to get help. So I learned how to work into an executive team where you took your ideas, you fleshed them out, you asked people to get on board, and you made it really clear what you needed from them when everybody left the room. I learned all about how to kind of secure that, I suppose, investment, whether it's time, resource, or even just people being behind you. There were some pretty tough days, you know. Good lessons learned though, and the ability to kind of, you know, the person I worked for there gave me a lot of rope. I think there was one occasion where it was the worst punt you could ever. I mean, it didn't go well. It was a bad moment, you know. But I think the way that I handled it, so I owned it. I said, this has gone horribly wrong, you know, but realistically, no one is injured, hurt, you know, financially, it's minor. Reputationally, it's fine. It's just been time and effort. And I think that's okay, you know, but I owned it. And, you know, for that, there was a little bit of respect and a kind of, what won't you do ever again? That was okay as well. Good question. Now you've kind of owned that this hasn't worked. What would you do differently? Because, you know, so I felt a bit told off, but not to the extent that I would stop trying, you know. I never did stop trying.
So what's driving you at this stage to keep trying and to keep improving, to keep changing things for the better?
I think somewhere along the way, between those last two jobs, I genuinely found a love for the sector. I genuinely, and you know, and I'm sure that most of the people you talk to, you know, I genuinely think post-16 education does transform lives. I think, honestly, I'm not so sure about the whole. I mean, it is a second chance for some people, but I think it's the transformative power, whether it's your first chance, your second, or your fifth. You know, there's such a lot in the post-16 space that happens that people underestimate. So I think just being part of something where you can see that somebody has gained something, whether it's confidence, resilience, a qualification. Sometimes the qualification's the least important bit of it. You know, they're sort of almost a pit stop along the way to somebody achieving, you know, their dream job or getting to university or whatever it was. You know, and somewhere in all of that, I don't know, I kind of, I really, really like the energy that colleges have. And I really like the sort of student activity and the buzz you get from kind of seeing somebody achieve. So, you know, the student awards are so joyous, and sometimes it's the smallest things, sometimes it's the big things. So I think by the time I'm in the sort of vice principal job, I'm kind of really driven by the fact that, you know, a college that does really good things and that takes some risks, a college that focuses on students, first and foremost students, that's for me. You know, this works for me. And I'm prepared to do the long days, and I'm prepared to kind of put in the reading, I'm prepared to put in the effort, because I genuinely think it does transform lives, so why wouldn't you? You know? And I think there was a little bit of me that perhaps was in the next job that I took, I went back to the college where I'd done my A-levels, my evening class. Just by accident, I went back there. That's where I ended up working. In my interview, I mentioned that I'd done night school there, and I think it flicked a switch for one of the panel, which was funny because it was like a million years ago. But I think underneath it all, without the opportunity to get on a train and go to those night school classes, I don't know where I'd have been. You know, I'm not sure what would have happened to me, because without that choice, I don't know whether I'd ever have made it to London, which means I don't know if I'd have ever have made it through this journey, you know. And I'm not going to speculate on it, obviously, but going to night school did something different for me, you know, even though it was tortuous.
And you see that with the students coming into your college every day.
Yeah. And I think maybe there's a little bit of that underneath it. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. It's so important, particularly at the moment. There's all this debate about university and student debt.
Yeah.
It's time for FE really to get loud and proud about the things it can do, and particularly when you look at modern UK in terms of what we need right now. We need a hopeful start for young people.
Yeah. And I do think, what's really, really fascinating about the way that colleges work is the breadth of and it's not the breadth of the qualification offer, because that's always been the case, really, you know, in the places I've worked. But it's the breadth of the wraparound. So the amount of work we do here, for example, with employers, and I know most of my colleagues, you know, they'd say exactly the same thing. To be able to attract employers who come and inspire our students, or give them a reality check. This is the career you're interested in. This is what it's like every day. You know, these are the good bits. These are the bits you have to put. You know, if somebody had really said to me when I thought I was going to be an accountant, mate, you're going to end up sitting looking at like ledgers for, you know, 5 hours a day. If you're lucky, it might be 5, if not 8. I probably would have gone, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. When I was 17, as opposed to when I've been doing it for a bit, you know, it might have changed my mind. So some of the stuff we do in colleges, that some of the sort of broader educational pieces, I think are so vital right now. They're just vital.
Yeah, so important. Okay, so this is all building and building. At some stage, there's an unusual route to a CEO role, isn't there?
Yeah. So I'd been away from working in South Yorkshire for a while, and the commute was okay, but it was a big, you know, I thought, time for a change. There is never a reason, there never has been any reason, really. So when I've moved on from jobs, it's usually because I've seen something. I've never been looking. I've never looked. The only time I ever really looked was when we thought we might leave London. That was when I looked, because we thought we might leave. But we were only going to leave if there was something that came up. So I'm not looking for a new job, but I see a job in Sheffield and I think, I give it a punt. I honestly, when, you know, thinking about what I'm saying to you, there's a lot of giving a punt in. I'm like, oh, I'll give it a punt. So I applied for the principal's job at this college. I didn't know a massive amount about the college. I'd lived in Sheffield for a while, but I'd never worked here. And what I knew from working in the sector. I knew some of the people who worked here because I was on the circuit, you know, networking and whatever. So I applied for the principal's job, and I came for the interview. And the day that I came for the interview, it was the day after the Manchester bombing. And I was working at Manchester College, and my job there was, I was a vice principal there, and I had responsibility for safeguarding and things like that. So I nearly didn't come to the interview. So I rang in and I said, I'm not going to go to this interview. I'm going to come to work because this is awful, and I'm going to come in. And my boss there said, no, you're okay. Just do it, and we'll phone you. Just, you know, check in every now and then. We've got this, you know, it's fine. And I thought, I don't feel quite right about this. And then, but I came for the interview, and, you know, I was lucky enough to be, I was successful, and I was a bit like, what? I was genuinely surprised, because I think on the day I was marginally more distracted than I might have been usually. And I said at the beginning, you know, I may have to take a phone call, I might be distracted, but my job there is this, and this is, you know, I'm here, but, you know. Anyway, so they offered me the job, and I said, that's brilliant, you know, fantastic. At the point of taking the job, I think 2 or 3 things happened. The first thing that happened was I had a sudden realisation that I'd never worked where I lived. I still think about that now. Never had a job where I'd lived near to a college that I was working in. Never. So this was new. And I still to this day miss the commute time for thinking. I still miss that, which is interesting. So I've had to find other ways of finding the time to think because I get home too quickly, which is a luxury, but weird. The other thing was that at my leaving do, I said to a friend of mine who is a colleague here now, I said, I don't even know if I can do this job. I genuinely don't. I mean, I'm going to try, but I might be awful at it. And he said, why would you say that? And I said, well, I've never done a job like this before. It's a massive college. And this could be the worst thing I've ever done, and I could be terrible at it. And his advice to me was, well, you won't know till you try. And I thought, yeah, all right, Dad, thanks. You will be okay. You'll be fine. And if you're not, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? And I thought, I ask him that because he works with me now. And sometimes I go, what's the worst thing that could happen then? You know, now you're here, kind of. So we have fun conversations. But I do remember having, for the first time ever in a move, a level of worry that I had never had. I think it's because it was possibly a proper responsibility. You know, like there wasn't much of a gap between me and anybody else. Yeah. So, you know, as I've moved jobs, there's always been somebody else, and there's always been a peer group. There's always been, even as a vice principal in the 2 colleges I worked in, there was peer group, you know, and this felt so pointy that there wasn't a great deal of anything else. So anyway, I joined the Sheffield College, and within the first half term, what I'd realised was the Sheffield College, we were due an inspection. There was a high level of confidence in the governors and the leadership team about the inspection. I knew by half term that was unfounded. The deputy principal knew, and so we worked hard together to kind of work out what that meant. Like, what was I seeing that wasn't visible to other people? It didn't feel like a happy organisation. You know, so I was quite happy. I'd kind of joined and I was quite kind of, oh, this is great, isn't it? You know, how much fun is this? This is, you know, I'm really nervous, but at the same time, this is really exciting. And I'd kind of get in the lift and I'd say good morning and nobody would reply. And I'd be like, oh, this is a miserable place. I don't know about this. Oh, what have I done? You know, have I done the right thing? And so we knew that we had Ofsted come in. We also had invited the FE Commissioner to come and do a diagnostic assessment of the organisation as a pilot, which worried me because, you know, I didn't know what that would bring as the principal. By the time the FE Commissioner came, I was acting chief exec. I'd never been a chief exec. I didn't even know what that meant. You know, I sort of say this to people sometimes, and when I talk about being the chief exec, and I've worked it out with the help of the chair of the college. He's amazing. He's not the chair now, but the chair at the time. What an amazing man. And he said to me one day, you need to be more the chief exec. And I went, what do you even mean? I had such a good relationship with him. And he said, well, you need to get out and about and do stuff. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. I really genuinely don't. But what we agreed between us was, this is how I have managed being the chief exec stroke principal, is the chief exec feels more about the statutory pieces and the external networking, and the principal feels more like looking in and doing the curriculum in the college. And so for the first couple of years that I was here, I was very 80-20 the principal, because the college needed attention. And I really care about all of that stuff. I really care about student experience. So I threw myself into that. And the longer I've been here, the more I've been sort of 50-50, a bit more chief exec if I don't need to be quite so much the principal, you know. And I've been able to sort of do a bit more of the external stuff, because I kind of, people in the external landscape respond to the chief exec words that more than they do the principal. People in education respond to the principal. You know, like it's quite an interesting vocabulary that generates people's response to you. Anyway, so I was interim chief exec from about November. And then the chair decided that he wanted a different structure because chief exec and principal, he decided he just wanted one job. And so in the March, I haven't been here a year at this point, the principal's role was deleted and I was effectively redundant with an opportunity to apply for an externally advertised chief exec and principal role, or there was a role that was a suitable alternative as I think it was the deputy chief exec role, was a permanent role that I could step into if I wanted to. So I thought, well, that's fine. I'll apply for the role, and knowing I've got this other role, so it's fine. But it was turbulent, and at the same time, I was trying to restructure the curriculum, and I was trying to. We'd had an Ofsted, and it had gone okay. It wasn't great. I think we were given opportunity by the team more than anything, to kind of. They were giving us an opportunity to try, because we were a new team, So all of this was going on around me. Anyway, by May of that year, I still haven't been here a year. I was really lucky to get the permanent job of chief exec and principal. And at the time, it felt, I can honestly tell you that it felt like a relief rather than a joy, because it had been so turbulent for, I joined the college in September, this is May, and I don't think a week had passed without something, and so I kind of, by the end of that May, I felt like I'd gone, oh, okay, all right, well, we can crack on now.
So
that's how it felt.
You've got the job, and we can actually start tackling some of the
Yeah.
issues and dealing with it.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Wow.
It was a tough year.
Yeah.
Mainly because, well, I suppose there's a couple of bits to it. I mean, it's a tough year because it was a tough year for the college. It was a really tough year. Everybody was looking in, and everyone was commenting, and there was only a few people who were actually doing anything, because it was just that kind of a year. And I think the other thing was I literally had never been a principal, and I had definitely never been a chief exec. This is a huge organisation, and it wasn't in good shape. And I think it would. I don't know that it was entirely imposter syndrome, but there were days when I thought, what am I doing? Just because there were things I'd never done before. There was stuff I'd never experienced, because I hadn't had a reason to experience some of the stuff that was going on around me. And I think it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be when I said, I don't know if I can be the principal, because I think that bit felt easy compared to the job I ended up in,
Right.
which I really didn't. I called on my networks a lot. I talked to a lot of people who over the years I'd connected with. I got some amazing support from people in the sector that I'd worked for or worked with or just connected with at networking events. So people sent me a lot of stuff. They visited, they kind of were on the end of the phone. And I couldn't have done it without probably 6 or 7 people who just routinely kind of went, are you all right? Do you need anything? And I think our sector is a bit like that. When things are wobbly, there's always someone you can pick the phone up to, which is a good thing. It was a tough year, that one.
Wow. So when you turn up and it's the first day, CEO, you walk into the office, you close your door, you sit down at your desk.
Yeah.
What's going through your mind at this point?
Well, so at this point, the FE Commissioner isn't interested really, but we're on watch, but there's nothing really to see, because we're a new team and we're, motoring a little bit. Ofsted have been and gone and it's not great, and they are going to come back. But, I think so I've got a context, and I've got a set of things I have to do. I've got no choice. And again, I come back to it's how I'm going to do it that really matters. It's the things that there are some things you've no choice. You've just got to crack on. I think what I probably did first and properly, and I'd already been working on it, was establishing a team around me that would support me through rapid improvement, because no matter where I looked, it was rapid improvement. So the structure in the college felt a bit light on leadership. It felt a little bit fragmented. Culturally, our campus all have different personality, even now, and I love it. But at the time, they felt like different colleges, not different campus. So there was a lot to do. So I spent from the May to the summer term, to the end of the summer term, getting a team together. So, and some of those team are still working here now with me, which is fantastic, because they are excellent people. And it took me probably 3 years to get the executive team, the sort of the heart of it is still the same heart of it, of people who are so committed to this organisation. It's unbelievable, and then to create a sort of curriculum leadership team that was strong, because that also didn't feel like, the staff were quite quiet. So I set about creating a team that could lead the college. And then when we hit the new academic year, myself and Paul, who is our exec director of people, we determined that we would be people focused. So we'd have a student first message. So all of our decisions, and they still are student first. So how will it affect a student? Will it make any difference to a student's experience? And that's kind of standard for us, which is really great. But that we would do a lot of work on the people culture. So we do a lot more communicating, and we get out and about. We try and be a lot more visible. I have to say that, ironically, the turning point for us was the COVID lockdown. So we closed the college earlier than we were supposed to. So we were a week early. We were locked down by the time lockdown was announced. We were done, which went down really well with our staff at the time. And then through that period, we did lots and lots and lots of communicating every single week, constantly communicating. And I think that some of that established a sort of together culture, a team chef culture. Not entirely, but it was an ironically good start. It's just such an irony that something like that would make it. We went faster than we would have done had we not had that moment. I think when somebody said to me not that long ago, "What do you think the hardest decision you've ever made was?" And I went, "I don't think it was the hardest decision. I think it was a really easy decision, but it was a hard decision to position." Was coming into work on the Monday morning and saying, "From today, we're going to close every campus one day at a time. We're going to close a campus. And as a team, I need you to go and do that for me, and we're going to do it. So we're going to work on telling people that's what we're doing. You're going to actually do it. Off you go, And we did. And my chair was alongside me, and we were done by Friday afternoon. And on the Monday, the whole country was closed. But we were done. And we hit FE week, college closes down kind of thing. And it's still the right decision. I still stand by it being absolutely the right decision. But, it was a big decision to take. And I had a conviction about that one. Wow. And I wouldn't change that decision, not in a heartbeat. But it wasn't popular. No. And it was criticised, for a week.
6 years ago today, the country closed down as a whole, okay. But all through this career story of yours, you're talking about people, the importance of being around people, whether it's the students, the staff members, and then suddenly you're at home.
Yeah.
And there's nobody around you. Yeah, and you're in this new job,
So by then, I'm sort of 3 and a bit years in.
Right. Okay.
But it's been a bit of a slog over 3 years. I think at this point we've had 2 or 3 Ofsted visits. We've had 2 full and a series of visits. And, there's always been something. And then the lockdown, and I found myself, I was super busy the whole time in my house, online, pretty much all the time. But also to some extent, I'm really lucky. Me and my family we were all at home. My kids were in a good place by and large, and we did this. This is a little bit of insight into me, literally, not me, the chief exec. So our joined on neighbours, we had Fence Down Friday every week.
Literally,
so we took a fence panel out and left it out, and we sat miles apart from each other with a fire pit each, and we sat every Friday just for a couple of hours, as far away from each other as you can possibly imagine. And we just sat there, and the kids threw balls at each other over the fence, basically, because they were already friends. But they were on other sides of the fence throwing balls at each other, which was sometimes viciously, sometimes for fun. And I really value that whole experience in terms of I was really lucky. I was really lucky to be able to do that, because there were times when, like everybody else, we were kind of, oh, yeah, this is hard. And then on a Friday, we'd just be out the back with a fire pit. And the only time that didn't work out brilliantly was when my lovely neighbour said, what I think we should do this week is make a cocktail out of all of the bottom ends of the booze bottles we've got. And I went, that is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
It was terrible for her. That's all I'm going to say about
right,
that.
yes, yeah.
It's terrible for her. But yeah. I think from a college point of view, we did so much communicating. I am blessed to have some excellent people working with me who at that point really stepped up. And, you know, the marketing team here, the communications they did through that whole period were amazing. They worked tirelessly, because a lot of it's just about what people came to expect, to know. They just wanted clear direction. So when we reopened, how were we reopening? You know, that was very different. It was very different. I did spend a lot of time online. We did some socials in our exec team, and sometimes we were too tired to do the socials, but, you know, we did a few socials. It was good to get back face to face. At the time, my deputy chief exec, Anita, you know, we came back on campus, but we were still supposed to be keeping our distance. She was hopeless at that. Hopeless. The first thing she did was give me a hug, and I was like, mate, seriously.
Yeah.
You know, but it was good to be back. I think it really did accelerate how things were moving. I think, you know, we gained pace in that period of time. And, you know, there's probably, I don't know, you could probably do a bit of research about that, because I think it was awful, but it helped. Because when we came back, I think we had a different attitude to each other and to communicating with each other. And we still do some of the things we were doing then. We're still doing them now, because people seem to appreciate it. So we carried on doing it, you know, which was really good. It was hard, that, though.
Yeah. Amazing, isn't it? Yeah, just how that one event forged some really successful teams, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of living through that whole thing and nobody knowing what tomorrow was going to bring.
Yeah. Intense, very intense.
Okay, so you've come back stronger from COVID, and then there's this sort of meteoric rise in terms of sorting the college out and moving it forward at pace. I don't know if would it be meteoric? Do you know what I think? Yeah.
Honestly, I'm really lucky, because I work with some amazing people across the college, and they're in all types of roles. And I think the thing that, the people who work here might disagree, but I've been kind of persistent about something that, and I like doing this, but some days I think, why am I doing this? So I'm kind of quite persistent about saying hello to people and genuinely stopping for a chat. And sometimes I stop for a chat and I think, why am I telling you this? Like, you know, the human side of me, I'm having a chat about something and I literally think, why am I telling Alan? Why am I telling him this? And I'm just having a chat, you know, and I think I'm not very good at. So I went and did a thing one day, and I said, I don't know what a chief exec is, right? Because all I'm able to be is me. And everybody in the room burst out laughing and went, fair enough. And I thought, well, I don't really understand. What am I supposed to be doing? And they said, yeah, you're probably better if you're just you, given, you know. And I said, I know, but is it going to, like, is that okay? Kind of, you know, how authentic or whatever, you know, is it all right to be just me, kind of, you know? And it's a really interesting conversation, because I'm not very good at, well, I suppose the long and short of this is, yesterday, Monday night at home, I said, oh, tomorrow I've got the Department for Education coming in and I've got this dinner I've got to do. So in the morning I've got to, like, you know, suited and booted. I've got to look the part tomorrow. I literally said, I've got to look the part. My husband went, your hair is pink. That ship has sailed, and then left the room. And I thought, oh, yeah. That's fair. And I think the thing that I've done in this job is allowed myself to be me. So I'm not really bothered about the ceremony of the job, the hierarchy of the job. I'm not overly interested in, I don't feel like I have to be in a suit, and I don't have to look a particular way. It's quite freeing to just be me. And I'm probably 95% of the time, this is who I am. So I'm wandering around, just being me, which feels a lot easier. And I think the only thing I'd say about that is that what I've learned is not to be the me that my friends experience on a Saturday afternoon, because this is still my job and this is still a serious job, you know, and people have the right for me to respect the fact that this is a chief exec job. They have the right to expect that of me. So, you know, I'm not frivolous about it, but I also I don't feel the need to be seen as, you know, it's not something that is a seeing thing. This is more of how I do it. So I like to talk to people. I like to get around. I ask a lot of questions. I'm still really curious about things. I'm curious about people. I'm curious about how things work. And I spend a lot of time each year in staff forum. So I don't do the student forum anymore, which is a little bit disappointing, but the deputy principals like to do that, so fair enough. So I do the staff forum and I go and see staff teams. I try to see everybody once a year. I spend about 45 minutes with each team without their managers, and I just kind of go, because I talk to the managers all the time, and I kind of go, what's going on? How are you doing? What are you up to? You know, sometimes we talk about things that could be better. Sometimes we just, you know, Q&A. Hopefully it works for people. You know, people turn up, so I'm assuming it does. But they get this version of me. There isn't another version of me. And, you know, I don't know that I could do it any other way, you know, and yeah.
But what do people want from their leaders? You know, authenticity, honesty. I've got a problem.
Yeah.
Can we chat?
Yeah. And, so sometimes when I sort of reflect on this, I think nobody gets it right every day. And there are some days when I am catastrophically wrong, you know, and I can see it on the faces of the people I work with. They're going, what are you doing now? What are you actually doing? Or I can see them going, sure. And I can read them quite well. And I think some of it is about awareness that you might be getting it wrong. So, and some of it's about asking for feedback. Some of it is, I don't know. I still find that, you know, maybe once a week, once a fortnight, I'm still saying to people, I don't think I got that right at all. Or did that work? You know, I'm really interested in, if I've read a situation and think to myself, yeah, that wasn't my best moment, I'm really interested in kind of going, that wasn't my best moment. Yeah. Do I need to, I think I'll say sorry. I'll go and find that person and I'll say, that wasn't great. I'm so sorry, you know, and try and get a kind of conversation that puts it right. And, you know, to some extent, I have the privilege of doing that. The job gives me the privilege of doing that, actually, because, you know, I can kind of wander around and find people and go and ask them or talk to them. And generally it's okay. And people talk to me all the time in the lift now, which is lovely. It's really lovely. When I think about that first sort of 6 months where literally silence in the lifts, you know, and now I'm in the lift and I'm trying desperately to remember people's names because I can't. And I'm like, oh, who are you? I know your face. Yeah. You know, it's such a privilege.
It is. But if people turn up with smiles on their faces and they're happy, it's amazing what you can achieve, isn't it?
Yeah.
And believing that tomorrow's going to be better than today. It's just the golden rule of leadership. Yeah.
And, you know, even in a team, in a staff team of 1,000, there are always some people who it isn't working out for or who aren't as happy here as I would want them to be. But I you know, it's better than it was. And in an educational setting, it's constant improvement. It's continuous improvement towards the best state you can get to, and it will never be perfect. And I guess, you know, one of my big takeaways, you know, if I think back to my kind of, you know, this is a job where nothing's ever perfect. And if you're striving for perfection, this is a job that will, you know, it will exhaust you. But you can do so much good, and it's, you know, it's a joy to be part of this organisation. It's really great.
Wonderful. That's a great career story. But I've got one final question. Yeah. Okay, if there's somebody out there, maybe they're lecturing or teaching on an hourly rate or something, and go, cool, I fancy being the chief exec, you know, what advice would you give them to actually make that step up and actually go for it?
Well, first of all, I'd say go for it. I'd definitely say go for it. I'd say, in my experience, the things that make jobs like that doable are good networks. Have people you can ask. Don't worry about asking. Ask for help. Ask people to check what you're doing. Work out the things you don't know and ask for help, because there will be lots of things you don't know. Find the people that you trust and get them around you, because you can't do it on your own. Absolutely can't do it on your own. But first things first, go for it. What's the worst thing that's going to happen if you give it a shot or if you take a punt?
Exactly, yeah. Sounds like somebody else has been given that wisdom once before. Yes, exactly. Wonderful. Angela, it's been an absolute delight talking to you and hearing your career story. It's been wonderful to come here to the college and see it all. And how wonderful, you've got your own podcast studio.
It's great, this, isn't it?
It is brilliant. So thank you so much for freely giving your time and that honesty. And I'm sure this story will inspire many others.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to Inspiring Working Lives, the Morgan Hunt podcast, driving positive change and helping you to grow your career. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring conversation. For more insights, opportunities, and updates, head to morganhunt.com.